there, and welcome to the Okie Dokies crochet tutorial for making your very own adorable loaf cat. I'm Haley and I'm so excited to crochet with you today. In this video, we'll go step by step so you can follow along at your own pace. Before we dive in, here are the basic skills or stitches you'll need for this project. Magic ring alternative, single crochet, increase, decrease. If you're new to any of these, don't worry. You can find quick tutorials for them right above the video on this page, or head to our crochet basics section on the tutorial page of our website. Take your time practicing before jumping in here. There's no rush. Let's take a look at everything included in your kit to make your cute little loaf cat. If you're using the Okie Dokies crochet kit, you'll have 2 colors of our chenille yarn, a crochet hook, yarn needle, stitch markers, some eyes, and some stuffing. Now, a quick note before we get started, don't hesitate to pause or rewind anytime. You've got this. All right, let's get started. We're going to grab our yarn and hook and get started with creating a magic ring alternative. Alright, so for our magic ring alternative, we're going to hold the yarn in our non-dominant hand, hook in our dominant hand. We're going to wrap the yarn around our first 2 fingers. I like to kind of cross it in an X form. This just kind of helps me see what yarns I need to grab with my hook and what strands need to go where. So we're going to take our hook and we're going to go under this first part right here. We're going to grab the working yarn, and we're just going to pull it through so it makes a loop on our hook. We're going to grab the working yarn one more time and pull it through that loop. Now we're going to hold our finger right here on the hook nice and tight, and we're going to take this little short yarn tail and just gently pull so that it tightens up that knot. Now we have created the slip knot and a chain 1. So now we're gonna loop our yarn over our hook, pull it through one more time so that we have 2 chains. Now for the magic ring alternative, we're gonna go back into the second chain from our crochet hook. So the one right by this original knot, so we're gonna go 1, 2. And we're going to insert our hook right there. And then we're going to do 12 single crochets in this stitch. So yarn over, and you're going to pull up 1 loop. So you have 2 loops on your hook. And then we're going to yarn over again and pull through both loops. That's 1 single crochet. Let's do 11 more. In that same stitch, insert your hook. Create 11 more single crochets. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. All right. It's going to get kind of crowded on this little spot just because we have so many stitches in this one little stitch. So I like to kind of just pull this a little looser for a second just so I don't lose my yarn or my working yarn. And I'm just going to kind of make sure that you can see all the stitches just by making sure that the single crochets that we did at the end are not covering the ones from the beginning, which mine do not look like they are. If you have a hole in the middle, it's just because it's a little looser of a chain, totally fine. You can pull slightly on the little yarn tail, and that'll tighten it up a little bit. Otherwise, you can always sew it shut when you're done. Or we will be kind of placing an X on the cat's mouth, so if you want, you can place that right over that hole so that that kind of takes care of the sewing. So there's a lot you can do, but for now we're just gonna leave it so that way we don't mess anything up. All right, let's get our stitch marker going. All right, for round number 2, we're going to be doing 12 increases, or an increase in every single stitch of this round because we have 12 stitches in the round. So let's start. If you don't remember what an increase is just 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So we're going to start by inserting our hook into that first stitch, doing 1 single crochet, and then inserting our hook right back into that same stitch and doing another single crochet. That's how you do an increase stitch. And we're going to repeat that all the way around, so we have a total of 12 increases. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, we're going to go ahead and move that stitch marker up to the next round. All right, round 3, we're going to be doing 3 single crochets and then an increase, and we're going to repeat that 6 times. We're going to start 1 single crochet, 2, 3 in the first increase, 1, 2, 3, second increase, 1, 2, 3, 3rd increase, 1, 2, 3, 4th increase, 1, 2, 3, 5th increase, 1, 2, 3, and our 6th increase. All right, move that stitch marker up. Make sure when you're placing your stitch marker, you're placing it in the same spot every time. So if you're placing it on the first stitch of the next round, do that every single time. If you're placing it on the last stitch of the last round, you're doing that every single time. So just make sure you keep it consistent. Otherwise, if you keep switching back and forth, your stitch count will always be off. So just make sure you're keeping it in a consistent place every single time. I've been doing mine the first stitch of the last round, but whatever you feel comfortable with. All right, round 4, we're gonna be doing 4 single crochets and an increase, and we're gonna repeat that 6 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, increase number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, increase number 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, increase number 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, increase number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, increase number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, increase number 6. Move that stitch marker. All right, round number 5, we're going to be doing 5 single crochets and an increase. Again, repeating it 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 'increase', 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 'increase', 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increase, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increase, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increase, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, increase. Move the stitch marker. All right, at this point we have the size that loaf cat is gonna be around. So now we are just doing a whole bunch of single crochet rounds to get the full length of loaf cat. So for rounds 6 through 24, you're just doing 42 single crochets all the way around. So let's get started on round 6. Just 42. For the first round, when I'm doing single crochets all the way around, I like to make sure that I have 42, but then after that, you don't necessarily have to make sure like you're counting every single stitch, every single round. Just make sure that you're going into every single stitch and you should be good. If you're second guessing it, you can always count. No big deal. We're gonna start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. Alright, move that stitch marker. And one thing I like to do when making Loaf Cat, just because it is so many rounds, you're literally going around 18 times with single crochets, I like to just keep a little tally going of how many times I've gone around. Or you can like keep track of which round you're on by using like stitch markers. It's totally up to you, whatever you feel is gonna be best. But I like to just use tallies. I find it's a little bit easier for me. So we're just gonna keep going. We're gonna start round 7 and we're gonna do single crochets around again. All right, round 7 complete. Move that stitch marker up. Round 13, same thing, single crochets all the way around. All right, round 25, we're gonna start the decreases. At this point, when you have the entire body, I like to go ahead and place the safety eyes just to kind of help so that you're not trying to get it through a really tiny opening on one end. So we're gonna place them on this end of the loaf cat, and they're gonna go about rounds 4 and 5, somewhere in that range. So we're gonna start in the center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So somewhere, actually, I think we're gonna go somewhere between rounds 3 and 4. And you can always do this sooner as well if you don't want to have as much body to try and work around. But when I do the loaf cat's eyes, I like to kind of keep them above the center. So this one that's what it would look like if it were in the center. So we're gonna go in that kind of same area, but just up a little from the center. So a little more like that. But you can totally place the eyes wherever you want. And then we're gonna line the other one up just straight across with this one. And you wanna try and keep it in the same round as them. You want them to kind of be the same distance away from the center. Perfect, let's go ahead and add the backs on. I always like to double check how they look before I add the backs, just so that I'm not having to try and rip the safety eyes out. If you don't hear a click when you're putting it in, just double check that it's all the way in. You can kind of tug on the safety eye a little bit, and it shouldn't come out. So. All right, they should be in. Again, just kind of grab the safety eye and tug a little. If it comes out, obviously your safety eyes are not in all the way, but if it stays in, you're good. Now that we have the safety eyes in, we're ready to begin round 25. So go ahead and flip it back over. All right, round 25 is gonna be 5 single crochets and a decrease. And we're gonna repeat that 6 times. So we're gonna start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then for my decreases, I'm gonna be doing an invisible decrease, but you can do whatever kind of decrease you feel the most comfortable with. So for the invisible decrease, you're gonna take your crochet hook and you're gonna insert it into the front loop only of the next stitch. And then without doing anything with this yarn, you can even put it down for a second. You're gonna go straight into the front loop of another stitch, of the next stitch. So you should have the front loops of the next 2 stitches on your hook. At this point is when you yarn over and we're gonna pull through both stitches. And then we're just gonna yarn over and pull through 2 again. And that's the invisible decrease. Now let's keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, invisible decrease. If you want to do a regular decrease, that's fine. Just make sure you keep the tension even so that you're not getting any weird bumps or anything in there, because we want it to look smooth. 1, 2, 3, 5, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease, last time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, decrease. All right, move that stitch marker up. All right, so for round 26, we're going to be doing 4 single crochets and then a decrease, and we're going to repeat that 6 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, decrease, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, decrease. Last time, 1, 2, 3, 4, and decrease. Move that stitch marker. All right, round 27, 3 single crochets and a decrease. 1, 2, 3, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 'Sometimes it's hard to get the crochet hook into the front loop only on those stitches, so just do your best, but if you really can't get it in the front loop, just do a regular decrease. One, 2, 3, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 'Decrease, 1, 2, 3, decrease. All right, last time. 1, 2, 3, decrease. All right, move that stitch marker. At this point, I like to start stuffing the loaf cat just because you have so much to stuff already. Now we don't want it to be super small opening up here to try and stuff it. So go ahead and grab your stuffing. Luckily, the loaf cat is super easy to stuff because there's no weird crevices or anything in there. It's just one long body. So luckily you don't have to worry too much about, you know, making it fit in all the little areas. So we're just gonna grab some stuffing. All right, and again, always start with just little chunks of stuffing. Don't start with like a ton of stuffing. Especially with loaf cat, you wanna try and push it all the way down first. You don't want it to be sitting up here a little higher. You want it down here. So I always just like to do a little bit of stuffing at a time. I find that kind of helps it look more even, helps you avoid overstuffing it, all those things. So just break your stuffing into little bits. And depending on how much you want your loaf cat stuffed, you can either add more stuffing than you think you need, or you don't have to add all the stuffing if you don't want to. You can kind of just experiment with it on how much you want your loaf cat stuffed. So then once you kind of get it all the way full, I haven't like pushed down any of the stuffing and like compacted it yet. This is just it full of stuffing, so it's got, you know, a little squish to it, but that's exactly how we want. So we're gonna go ahead and start closing loaf cat up. So round 28, we're gonna be doing 2 single crochets and then a decrease, and we're gonna repeat that 6 times. So 1, 2, 'Decrease, 1, 2, decrease, 1, 2, decrease, 1, 2, decrease. Oops. If your yarn ever slips off your hook halfway through a stitch, I always like to just completely undo it and start over. That way I don't accidentally mess up the stitch, but it's totally up to you. 1, 2, decrease. All right, last time. 1, 2, decrease. All right, move that stitch marker up. All right, at this point you might start to kind of see some stuffing starting to come through. That little bit of stuffing just kind of got caught on my crochet hook, just because we stuffed it and then are trying to obviously sew, and so it, as you start to close it, it moves the stuffing around. So it's totally fine if it does that, just kind of pick it off. It's not that big of a deal. All right, round 29, we're going to be doing a single crochet and then a decrease, and we're going to repeat that 6 times. So 1, decrease, and this is kind of the round where it starts to get really tight really fast, just because you're doing obviously less single crochets because the hole's already smaller. So just kind of be prepared for that. Like, it will get really small and really tight really fast. So if you need to take the stitch marker out, or if you need to just do normal decreases, or whatever you need to do to make it a little easier on you, go for it. Decrease. Single. Decrease. All right, last one. Single. Oops. Decrease. All right. Now at this point, I do like to just take the stitch marker completely out. I don't like to have it in there for the last round just because it gets so hard to take out afterwards. So I like to just set it off to the side, because for this round, we're just doing 6 decreases. There are no single crochets. So for this round, I also like to just do regular decreases. I don't really like to do the invisible ones just because it gets really hard to get them in this small of an area. So we'll just do 6 regular decreases. So for a regular decrease, you're just gonna insert your hook into the next stitch, into both the front and back loops. You're gonna pull up a loop. So now you have 2 on your hook. Insert your hook directly into the next stitch, pull up a loop. So now you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops at once. That's how you do a regular decrease, and I'm just gonna do that 6 times around instead of an invisible decrease, just because it's a lot easier on this last round. And especially on Loaf Cat, we're gonna be sewing some stuff right over this hole, or this spot in the back, so it's okay if there's a few bumps right near the center, because we're gonna be sewing a tail over it, and it's not gonna be a huge deal. All right, one more. All right, I like to pull out a little yarn string like that first, and then we're gonna go ahead and cut off our yarn, and then finish pulling this all the way through. Pull it nice and tight, and then you're just kind of left with that little hole in the center. So we're gonna take our yarn needle, we're just gonna tie it on. All right, now to close up this hole, we're gonna insert our yarn needle into the front loops of all of those stitches in the last round. So just kind of take it, and you're just gonna go in the front loop. And this is just gonna kind of close up our little hole. And you'll notice, like, this end of Loaf Cat doesn't really have any stuffing, because obviously as we were working and adding more rounds, the stuffing kind of sat at this area. So as soon as you get this closed, we'll kind of move the stuffing around, but Right now, just kind of work on pulling this through all the front loops. And you'll notice once you get through a few and you start pulling it tight, that it's gonna start closing up that hole. So see, you kind of have a little hole and you're just gonna kind of gently pull it. And it's slowly gonna close up that hole. Just make sure you go through all the front loops and you don't accidentally skip one. And that's how you close it up completely. And then I like to just take my yarn needle and I'm just gonna stick it right into the center. And then just pull it out somewhere on Loaf Cat's body. Pull it all the way through. And then I'm gonna cut off my yarn. I just find that that kind of helps secure it a little more than cutting it off right here at the top. So we want it to be secure. We don't want Loaf Cat falling apart on us. All right, now you have the full Loaf Cat body. Just kind of go ahead and like move some of the stuffing around. It'll slowly move into the end, but now we have our body and we're ready to start building the ears, the legs, and the tail. All right, now that we have the Loaf Cat body done, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the ears, legs, and tail to finish them up. So let's go ahead and get started with the legs. We're gonna make 4 of them. We're gonna start by doing our magic ring alternative. And we're gonna do 10 single crochets to start the legs. So go ahead and chain. Make a chain of 2. Go into the second chain from your hook with 10 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, you should have your little starting circle. And then for rounds 2 and 3, we're just gonna do 10 single crochets around. So I'm not gonna use a stitch marker just because we're doing such a small little piece here. So we're just gonna count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then after that second round, I like to go ahead and flip the piece so that we have our right side facing out. Just kind of helps me make sure that we're doing everything right so far. And then we're going to do our third round. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then I like to end off the legs all with a slip stitch just to kind of help secure it. So you're just gonna insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop and then pull that loop right through. Then we're just gonna pull and cut the yarn. And that's all for the loaf cat legs. So we're just gonna make 3 more. Leave a little bit of a yarn tail because you'll be using this to sew it onto the loaf cat, but otherwise this is the little leg. So let's go ahead and make 3 more. All right, once we have all 4 legs, we're gonna move on to doing the tail and the ears before we get to sewing them on. So we're gonna start on the tail. We're gonna do our magic ring alternative. This time though, we are only doing 5 single crochets instead of 10 like we did for the ears. So we're gonna start 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now the tail is super easy to make. We are just going to do 5 single crochets around, and we're going to go up to 17 rounds. So you're doing 16 rounds of just 5 single crochets all the way around because we want to make a really long tail. So we're going to go ahead and start the single crochets. We're going to start 1 and 2 3 4 and 5. And then I like to try and flip this tail inside, like to the right side, as soon as I can, because otherwise if it starts to get really long, it's really hard to flip it, just because it is so small around. So try and get it flipped earliest you can in your tail, but if you need to wait until a few more rounds, you totally can, but I just flipped it. So we're gonna go ahead and just keep going. Obviously you can change how many rounds of single crochets you do to, if you want your tail longer, you can always add more rounds. If you want it a little bit shorter, do less rounds. So just kind of do whatever feels right to you. You can even hold it up against your loaf cat and just see, you know, how you like it to look. But for me, we're gonna do about 16 rounds of single crochets. But since this is so small, I'm not using a stitch marker, so I just kind of like to go for a little bit and then I'll count it and see where I'm at, just because you're just doing single crochets. So it's very easy to just get a little ways first and then figure it out. So just kind of get started and then figure it out when you get a little bit more length on there. when you get your cat tail to the length that you want it, we're gonna fold the top in half, and we're just gonna do some single crochets across the top so that it's a little easier for us to sew it on. So we're gonna insert our hook into both sides of the tail and pull up a loop and just single crochet as normal. And depending on how you do it, you could either do 2 or you could do 3 single crochets. I normally do 3. Pull it out a little bit. Give yourself a good yarn tail. And now you have a cat tail. All right. Next up are the 2 ears. So we're going to go ahead and start with our magic ring alternative. And this time we're doing 4 single crochets for our magic ring alternative. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, these they start off really small, so we're just gonna not use a stitch marker, we're just gonna rely on counting. So we're gonna start with doing a single crochet and an increase, and we're gonna do that twice. So we're gonna start with a single crochet, and then we're going to do an increase. It does get really small, it gets kind of tight, so just do your very best. But it is really hard, so don't feel like you're not doing it right. It's just kind of tricky. All right, again, kind of the same thing with the tail. We're going to flip it as soon as we can so that we don't have to try and flip a really awkward shaped piece. But this is not wanting to flip right now, so we're going to keep going. Round 3, we're going to do the same thing, just the single crochets and an increase, but instead of twice, we're going to do it 3 times now. So single, increase, single, increase, single, increase. All right, round 4, we're gonna do 2 single crochets and then an increase, and we're gonna repeat that 3 times. So 1, 2, 3, increase, 1, 2, increase, 1, 2, increase. All right, and round number 5, we're going to do 3 single crochets and an increase, and repeat that 3 times. So 1, 2, 2, 3, increase, 1, 2, 3, and increase. Alright, now we're just going to take our cat ear, we're going to fold it in half, and then we're going to single crochet across the top. Alright, once you're done with the single crochets across the top, cut the yarn, leaving a yarn tail, pull it all the way through and tight. You'll kind of have what looks like a little chip, and you're going to go ahead and make a second one. Alright, now we just need to put all of the pieces of our loaf cat together. So I like to start with the legs just to kind of give our loaf cat a little something to stand on and a little help us be able to align everything else correctly. So for the legs of your loaf cat, depending on where you place the eyes is where you're going to place them on the body, but obviously they go on the bottom. So I like to kind of put the legs like 2-3 rounds apart, roughly there, 2 or 3 stitches apart there. So we just kind of have a nice little square just right in the center of the bottom of our body. So not too close up here, not too close down here. You don't really want it on any of the parts that are decreasing to get up to like make the face or the back. So we're going to go ahead and place them in the middle. So go ahead and attach one leg to your yarn needle. And the first leg is always the hardest to decide where to put it. Once you put the first leg on, you can always use that as your guide for all the other legs. But I do kind of like to keep them in line with the eyes and kind of use that as like the guide. So we're going to kind of place them like down here in line with the eyes. So I think I'm going to put the first one over here on this side. And at some point you just kind of have to decide and just start sewing it on. So that's what I always start doing, is I just start sewing it on, and then I can always kind of undo it if I need to, switch the spot up a little bit. But I think we're gonna go right there. I think looks good for loaf cat. So to sew it on, you're just gonna kind of go switch off between going through a stitch in the leg, pulling it tight, and then going through the body. And you're just gonna go all the way around the leg. There's no need to stuff the legs just because you're using the yarn tails and you're sticking them inside. So you don't really need to add stuffing to the legs, but you totally can if you want to. And as with everything else on this project, you can place the legs wherever you want. You don't have to follow where I'm putting mine. Feel free to place them where you would like them. But you're just gonna sew them on. Making sure they're on nice and tight. We don't want them falling off. All right. Alright, then once you get it fully sewn on where you want it, go ahead and just take your yarn needle and we're just gonna insert it into Loaf Cat, and I like to just kind of pull it out on one of the sides of his body just to kind of help hide the yarn tail, secure it, and then just cut it off. And then once you have that first leg on, it's easier to place the other legs just because now you kind of have an idea of where your legs are going. So like I said, first leg is the hardest, but all right. So then just go through and you're just gonna attach all of the legs to the body. Like I said, I normally do about 2 to 3 like stitches or 2 to 3 rows in between every leg, so they kind of just are in a square, but you can do it however you want. So feel free to sew your legs on your Loaf Cat however you want to. This is just how I'm doing mine. Right, if you end up getting little bits of stuffing poking through, that's totally normal. I like to just take my crochet hook and just go up into that spot and just kind of use my hook to pull some of the stuffing back in. Or you can just kind of pull it out, but sometimes that makes more come out, so you just kind of have to do what you can. You can cut it off. Just kind of clean them up a little bit. So, all right, we're gonna call that good for now. And now we have all of Cat's legs on, so you can stand. And that kind of is gonna help us when we're putting on the ears, kind of use as a guide to match them with the legs. And then we can kind of center the tail on the back in between the two legs. So that's why I like to get the legs on first. I think we're gonna go ahead and get the tail on next. I think it'll be easier for us. Well, let's do the ears actually. Go ahead and grab your ear. Obviously you can sew them on in whatever order you want to, but I think doing the ears next is helpful because then you can center the tail in between the ears as well. Just because you will see the tail from the front of the loaf cat, so. All right, so for the loaf cat's ears, I kind of like to do the starting point just inside of the eyes so that the eyes are kind of in the center of the ears, if that makes sense. So, and then I just do it kind of right. You can see where those increases are happening, and then right kind of where the single crochet section starts is where I like to put the ears. So starting with the first ear, you're gonna obviously start with this. I like to do my ears so that I'm starting on the inside and working out. Just that way I can kind of adjust it more instead of starting inside working in, because then if you adjust it too much, then they get up right next to each other versus going out further. So we're gonna start it on this ear. So I kind of just start by just looking at kind of where I want it, and then when you sew it on, you're gonna kind of sew it on a tiny bit of a curve. So you want to keep that in mind, but I think we're gonna go ahead and go right there. Alright, so as you're sewing these ears on, it's kind of hard, but you're gonna wanna make sure you just go through just the single crochets that we did across here. You don't wanna go into the actual ear, just these single crochets right here. So, just gonna kinda just start sewing them on. And like I said with the legs, you can always take them off and readjust. You don't have to, it's not permanent. So just start sewing and then you can make adjustments as you go. But you're kind of trying to sew them on in a fairly straight line. You're not really trying to curve it too much. The curve will come at the end. So try and just sew along one round. And keep it the same round for both ears. All right, so then when you get to the very last spot on the ear like this, all you're gonna do is instead of sewing it down like that, we're gonna just kind of sew it, just kind of take it and curve it ever so slightly in so that the ear kind of has a little curve. Too much and it's gonna start falling forward, and otherwise it's just gonna stick straight. So I just, instead of inserting it on that same round, all I'm gonna do is insert it one round forward. That's it. And just kind of pull it through, pull it out somewhere else on the body, and then just kind of pull it tight. You can see that kind of gave it a little more of a tilt and a curve, especially from the top. You can see it's leaning a little forward, but it's kind of able to move a little bit more. And then one thing I like to do, just because that stitch was the one securing that spot, I like to just go back in like just right there above it, just one round behind it, and then pull it out again somewhere random in the loaf cat body. So that stitch is gonna totally disappear that I just did. And then we're gonna cut it off back here. And now for the second ear. So again, we have this right there. And because this is just a circle folded in half, both sides are technically considered the right side, but you can see that this is curved a little bit. So I don't necessarily want to sew it on this way because then it's gonna go back. So for this one, you do always just have to sew with this on the same side for both ears. So if you do it on the right, do it on the right. If you want it on the left, do it on the left. Just make sure it's always starting on the same side, because then it's gonna kind of lean the same direction. So this one's harder because, you know, you're not working out like we did on this one. But it's also easier because now we know where we want the bottom of our ear to end up. So we can just follow, like just copy that on the other side. So right now we're kind of going in the middle of the eyes. So I'm just gonna kind of follow straight out from that. And I am 3 rows back. Again, just kind of follow that row right over. Perfect. So right here is where we're gonna attach the ear. And then exact same way you sewed the other one on, you know, going through those single crochets and sticking on the same row. So what we're gonna do all the way across. So same thing as the other ear. Working the same direction. Either right to left or left to right every single time. For both the ears, just because then you're gonna get even ears, so we want to make sure it's the same. Alright, so just keep going, and the biggest thing is that make sure that where this side is going to end is where this side is beginning. So just kind of look at that as you're getting closer. Make sure that it looks even to you and that you like it. And then just keep going. All the way through. And then we're gonna kind of do the same thing we did on this ear, where on the last stitch, we're gonna kind of pull it off to the side a little bit, just to kind of help with like that curve. So I'm on the last stitch. So just kind of sew it in. And then once you get to that spot, now I'm in the spot where I'm gonna pull it so it goes over this way. So we're just gonna insert it. over to that side. And now we have both of our loaf cat ears on. And then just kind of weave that yarn tail through a couple of times just to really secure it in there. Cut the yarn tail off. And they'll tend to kind of flop forward a little bit more. You just kind of have to train them. So just kind of keep messing with them a little bit. If they keep sitting like this and they're like completely over, just kind of keep pushing them back a little bit and they'll learn. But now we have ears on. So now we're gonna get the tail on, and then we'll move on to all of the fun decorations we get to do on the loaf cat. So for the tail, because it's so long, we want the tail obviously to kind of stick up past the body. We want to be able to see it from the front. So if you're looking at it and you're looking at its face, you want to be able to see the tail coming up, which is why it's so long. So obviously on this one, we sewed it, this X is right over where we sewed it on. So it's like just below the center ring. So we're gonna go ahead to, oh, some stuffing. So we're gonna go ahead, obviously you can kind of find the center where we closed up the loaf cat. And then just gonna go ahead and place it. And then I like to just look from the front and be like, okay, do I like how much the tail is showing? Do I want less tail, more tail? Obviously, it depends on how long you ended up making your tail. But then just kind of hold it in place and you're just gonna kind of sew it on. It's kind of hard to sew this one on because you can't really follow one of the rows. You kind of just have to go into the single crochets of the tail. And then you just have to go in and just find a spot to sew it in that lines up with where you're wanting it to be. So just make it look clean. If you do it right and you take your time, it'll look pretty seamless. You won't really be able to see a harsh line of where the tail is sitting, which is also why we do the single crochets across the bottom. It just kind of helps it look a little more seamless. So all right, and then once you get it sewn on like that, obviously the tail is gonna kind of stick out. So I like to use the yarn tail that I'm still doing and attach it to the body. So we're just gonna take it and just right from this stitch, I like to kind of pull it up through the body and get up to kind of where I'm wanting it, and then pull the tail up, and you're just gonna go through a like single stitch of the tail, and then as you pull tight, it just tightens the tail against the body. You can't see that there's any like line or anything of yarn. And then you're just gonna put it right back into the body, kind of just in that same area, and then pull it out somewhere else. And now our tail is gonna stick straight up like we want it to. And then again, I just like to weave in my yarn tails a couple of times before cutting it off, just to really hold it secure, especially for that last stitch where it's holding the tail up, because if it starts to come loose, then the tail will start to droop. So you can always like tie a knot if you want to, or do whatever you need so that your tail stays in place. All right, now we have all of the body parts of Loaf Cat on. So with the tail, the more you kind of mess with it, I like to just kind of curve it a little bit. And obviously because we've made it straight, it's gonna try and stay that way. So just the more you mess with it, the more curved it'll get, and you can just kind of have it however you want. So now we're gonna move on to embroidering the mouth, the whiskers, and anything else we want to put on it with black. You could add stripes, you could add spots, you can add whatever you want to your loaf cat. This is where you can kind of get a little unique with your loaf cat designs. But we're gonna start with the mouth because loaf cat needs a mouth. So we're gonna start obviously by attaching the yarn to our yarn needle. And then for the mouth, depending on where you placed your eyes, you can either sew it right over the center, or what I have on this one is it's kind of just right underneath the center. So just kind of depends. If you put your eyes up a little higher, the center would be good, but I put mine closer to the center, so we're gonna go just below the center for the mouth. So what I like to do when starting an embroidery is I like to start going in at the bottom, and then I'm gonna come out where I want the top corner of the mouth to be. Pull it up quite a bit, but still leave some hanging out down here. And then just embroider the X. Again, kind of just however big you want the mouth to be. That's kind of how you're going to do it. So just start with the diagonal. And then go up. And then go with the other diagonal. And then from that diagonal, I like to come out right next to where I put the yarn in. So now we have our X. It doesn't have to be perfect either. Sometimes with loaf cat, it just is hard. So you could kind of manipulate it a little bit, but I like it to be a little crooked, gives them a little character. So then what we're gonna do with this is I like to just cut the yarn tail off. And then we're gonna take these, once you have the placement finalized, and we're just gonna tie a knot, keeping, make sure the smile stays in place. But we're just gonna tie a knot, and then using your crochet hook, you can go in and then tuck those tails into the body and then cut them off. And then just go in and kind of use your crochet hook to kind of grab those little ends, pull them through. So you may end up with a little black spot right there. That's just a piece of fuzz that won't come off. So, but if you don't want to worry about possibly having that, you don't have to tie the knot. That's just how I like to secure it in there. It's really not too noticeable. You just kind of manipulate it, and it's just kind of there. From the front, you can't even tell. So. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is you can either do his whiskers or you can do the little X on his back. I like to do the whiskers, just kind of get the front stuff figured out first before I move on to the back. And you don't have to cut your yarn if you just want to do one long piece of yarn and just keep it for all of the black that we're doing. You totally can as well. I just like to have it separate just in case I need to go back and redo anything, but it's up to you. So for the loaf cat's whiskers, you kind of want to go more towards the outer edge of the eye on either side. So we're gonna kind of head right here. As you can see with this one, it's kind of right by the edge of the eye, and it goes back like down where those increases are. So it's not just on the front, it does go backwards. So like from the side, you can see the whiskers. So I'm gonna kind of start mine, I don't really want to start it in the exact same place I started the mouth with going in, because then it's just going to be a lot more black. This time we're going to go in right by a leg to kind of hide it a little bit more is what you can do. So you have to kind of decide where you want your whiskers to sit here and where you want them to end up back here. So we're going to start by coming out. I like to just kind of pull it out somewhere by the eyes. It doesn't matter if that's the final location for the whiskers or not, because we're just doing it to get our needle over here. So, and then just kind of play with it. Just kind of hold it with your hand and like decide if you like where that's sitting. I kind of want it to go back another round or two. So what I'm going to do is insert my needle right back into where that yarn came out of, and then just pull it out where I want it to come out. So, because we went back in the same hole, there's not going to be any sort of line or anything right there. And I like that placement a lot better. So just kind of look at it. All right, so I think we're going to kind of go with that angle for the first whisker. And just make it like 2 or 3 rounds long. It doesn't need to be super long. So, and then when I'm pulling it back out somewhere else, I want it to come right where I want the second whisker to start, right by the eye. And then you're gonna do the exact same thing, just kind of use your hand, pull it tight, decide how far you want the whiskers to be. I want it a little more right there. Stick it in. And then on this one, we're gonna bring our needle up and we're gonna try and get it all the way to the other side of the face. Kind of clean up the stuffing right there. Now you have one side of whiskers done, so now we're just gonna kind of mirror it on the other side. So again, to get it in the placement you want, you have to stick it back in the same hole. And then kind of just try and get it out where you want it. And then try and figure out the angle. It can be the same, it could be completely different, totally up to you. All right, I think we're just gonna go with kind of a similar angle as the other one and just kind of going back like 3 rounds roughly. And then coming out back over here for the second whisker. And then we're just gonna go at more of a downwards angle. And then again, just kind of try and pull it out on the bottom of the body. And now you have the whiskers done on both sides. Get it where your other yarn tail is. Tie a knot, and you could even have those yarn tails like I did. They're coming out of the same hole, but they're gonna tie a knot because it's like through so much stuffing and stuff, it's still gonna knot it in place. But then because they came out through the same hole, you can take your crochet hook and the entire knot is gonna disappear into the body. And then I'm just gonna cut off this excess yarn because I don't need that much yarn tail inside of the body. But then you're just gonna grab those yarn tails, pull them inside, and it's completely disappeared. So now you have the whole face done, and now we're gonna move on to the back side of our cat. And I still have enough yarn left on my needle that I'm just gonna use the same yarn that I did for the whiskers. So for the back of the cat, you just kind of want to make sure, oh, this one got a little messed up, but that's okay. You just kind of want to make sure it's centered right underneath where you attached the tail. So for this one, again, kind of going on the bottom, come out right by the tail. And then this one is a little less stressful because it's just on the back of the cat. You're not really going to be able to see it too well, so, or like all the time, you know, it's not like it's on the front. But you could totally display this because it looks cute. So for my X's on the back, I like to make them look a little messy just because I like to for the mouth as well. Just kind of gives Loaf Cat a little more personality. So it's not a perfect X, but it's cute. So do the exact same thing. Kind of tie that knot. These yarn tails got kind of short because I just used the same yarn. All right. Now you have Loaf Cat entirely done. All of his adorable, all of her adorable, cute little embellishments. You've got ears, 4 legs, and a super cute tail. Super cute Loaf Cat. Don't forget to share your finished products with us and share it on social media. Tag us at Okie Dokies Crochet. I would love to see all of your guys' finished products so I can see all your adorable little Loaf Cats. We'll see y'all next time.